This is a level that takes 1 second to beat. This is a level that takes 1 minute to beat. And this is a level that takes over 19 hours to complete. Yep, that's it. These 2 screens are all it takes. It is essentially an infinite loop of forcing the player to re-enter the same pipe over and over again until the timer nearly runs out. Yeah, I decided to be evil today. So did I really sit there for over 19 hours until I actually beat the level? Nope, no shot. I had my controller do that for me instead. Granted, it was a very janky way, it gets the job done. First, I used the D-pad to navigate into the level and set everything up before I proceeded with taping down the joystick to the controller. I made sure the joystick had no chance of slipping and laid the controller there until I needed to pick it up again. Oh, and the cable is to make sure the controller doesn't die. Now I know there are probably tons of better ways of doing this, but if it works, right? Anyways, now all the hard stuff is done. So now we just sit back, relax, and don't watch this for 19 hours. So why did I make this? What was the inspiration behind this level? Well, throughout my experience playing this game, I've stumbled across a bunch of time-consuming levels, ranging from slow auto-scrollers to lengthy red coin extravaganzas. Most recently, I got a level in Endless Expert where you are forced to swap between various different power-ups, which freezes the game in between each one. And that's when I thought to myself, what would be the most time-consuming level I could make? And it really sparked some gears in my brain. I really wanted to know, what is the longest, most time-consuming level I could make in Super Mario Maker 2? Now, Chainchomp Braden, the creator of Trials of Death, already came up with a pretty nasty level with this idea in Super Mario Maker 1, titled Trials of Time, which took them over 2.5 hours to complete. The basis for that level revolved around a door and pipe transitions, which freeze the in-game timer each time the player enters a door or pipe. But I wanted to do better than that. Or worse, rather. Step 1 was to figure out which idea proved to be the most time-consuming. First, there's the infamous lag machine, which basically simulates the online versus experience. By squishing multiple stars and springboards into an enclosed area, it causes the game to slow down by about 7.5 times. This makes a 500-second level take a little more than an hour. However, the downside is it takes quite a bit of time to set up, and it will also reset when entering doors or pipes, which severely limits my options. Next, there's what I like to call the power-up stunlock idea. Every time the player gets a different power-up or take damage, the game will freeze for a small amount of time. The goal with this idea was to enclose the player in a small area, forcing them to swap between the different power-ups and take damage at the same time to maximize how long the game freezes. The SMB1 theme proved to be the best choice, since it offers the most of these power-ups to cycle between, increasing the chances of freezing the game. Note that grabbing a mushroom while having one of these power-ups will not freeze the game, since they are stronger than a mushroom. Unfortunately, power-ups do not respawn, so once you grab one, it's gone for good. Not only that, but the game also caps you at 100 power-ups per area. But you can release infinite power-ups from red pipes, which dispenses them to the player somewhat fast. At its peak, it also takes roughly over an hour to clear, which is the same as the lag machine idea. Yet, both are still faster than Trials of Time. But we can still do better. Piggybacking off of Chainchomp Braden's level, the final idea was to use door and pipe transitions. Pipes prove to be more effective because they have a slightly longer transition than doors, since there is the extra animation of entering and exiting the pipe before the screen goes black. Not only that, but it takes longer to re-enter a door compared to a pipe. On top of that, re-entering a pipe from above also advances the game forward only 3 frames, which is literally faster than the blink of an eye. And by blocking the exit of the pipe, it forces the player through an additional pipe transition, further increasing the amount of time the game is frozen. This proved to be the most time-consuming idea. The only downside is that this idea does not let me combine some of the other ones together to stall the level even longer, but for the purpose of this level, it will suffice. So with the foundation laid for the level, the next step was to figure out how to even force the player into this situation. Thankfully, Mario Maker 2 introduced clear conditions, which makes a level impossible to be cleared until that condition is met, even if the player is physically touching the goal. First, I played around with the idea of hitting a certain amount of P-switches to win, since those are a common way level creators force players to wait for something to happen. Once a certain amount of P-switches have been activated, the goal appears. Simple as that. I also had to figure out how to go from hitting one P-switch to another. This was a bit tricky to figure out, but eventually I had an idea. A very complicated one. So when a player enters a door or pipe, the entire room will reset, with a few exceptions. P-switches will always respawn, bombs respawn even after being destroyed or detonated. However, blocks that have been destroyed will not. Neither will sprites or enemies that are part of a clear condition. They are both gone forever, even after resetting the room entirely. Additionally, any object or enemy placed over these destroyed blocks are now allowed to spawn because there is no solid object obstructing their way now. I can take advantage of these two concepts and create what I denote as the P-switch counter mechanism. In short, it will keep track of how many times a P-switch has been activated throughout the level. To start off, a winged muncher on a track crushes a bomb, causing an explosion that destroys an adjacent block placed 2 tiles away from where the bomb was. Every additional bomb besides the first one is placed over one of these blocks, so it allows the next one to spawn when the player re-enters the area. So by chaining the bombs together like this, it essentially creates a counter on how many times a player has re-entered the current room. 6 bombs destroyed means the player re-entered this room 6 times. This meant that it was more practical to tie the clear condition to bombs rather than P-switches, since it will also stop already destroyed bombs from respawning. By placing a muncher directly on top of a P-switch, it will activate shortly after the player loads the area. And since I associated the clear condition with bombs instead, that means both the muncher and the P-switch will always respawn. So I am able to create as many P-switch timers as I need to. The next step was to tie it to the number of times a P-switch has been activated. The easiest way to achieve this was to have it so a bomb can only be destroyed when no P-switch is currently active. Since it only takes 3 frames to re-enter a pipe, I set it up so it takes longer than 3 frames to destroy a bomb. Therefore, it prevents the next one from ever spawning until the P-switch timer runs out. And because these fire bars force the player to enter the pipe immediately, they cannot cheese this mechanism by delaying entry into the pipe to prematurely destroy a bomb. This has now been successfully turned into a P-switch counter. Additionally, I can block the exit to a pipe with an intangible P-block and prevent the player from accessing the next room until the P-switch timer expires. Thus, they are stuck on an endless loop of entering, failing to exit, and then re-entering the same pipe over and over again. At the same time, I can use the same block placed over this muncher, which will prevent it from spawning and activating another P-switch timer while one is already going, which would result in an infinite P-switch timer. Once this P-switch timer expires, it allows the player to travel successfully through the pipe into the next area, which is an identical room as the previous one, except it contains the words talk instead of tick. Because a P-switch is not currently active, it allows this muncher to spawn, which then starts another P-switch timer exactly 9 frames later. At the same time, it allows this bomb to get crushed by a muncher and destroy a breakable block right next to it. Therefore, the number of bombs that have been destroyed represent the number of P-switches that have been activated. And by associating the clear condition to bombs instead of P-switches, it allows me to force the player to hit a specific number of P-switches before they can complete the level. One of the biggest issues I stumbled upon was figuring out how to start the next P-switch timer. Unfortunately, the player re-enters this pipe so fast that it does not give enough time for the P-switch to activate, since it actually takes a bit of time to start even after the P-switch is visibly hit. That's why this second identical room exists. By exiting from the top and having the player fall 4 blocks into the pipe below, it gives enough time for the next P-switch timer to activate, continuing the loop. As a result, a bomb gets destroyed in the process, adding to the P-switch counter mechanism, and in turn, the clear condition. The player repeats the same exact process as the previous P-switch timer, but this time they go talk-tick instead of tick-tock. And there we go, a second P-switch timer has successfully begun. With this, I was able to calculate how long one of these P-switch loops takes in real time, so I could get an estimate on how long it would take to beat the entire level. After quick testing, I noticed it took about 22 minutes for a full loop, which meant this level would easily beat Chainchomp Brayden's level by a landslide. The next question to answer was, what is the maximum amount of P-switch timers I could fit in 500 seconds then? Not only was this an important question to answer, but it was crucial that the math required to calculate this answer was entirely accurate. Otherwise, I would have to play the entire level multiple times to account for my mistakes, which I totally didn't have to do, nope. Anyways, a P-switch is active for exactly 539 frames. The time it takes from one P-switch timer ending to another one beginning is exactly 10 frames, and this holds true for every single transition. This brings the total amount of time for a single P-switch loop start to finish being exactly 549 frames. Divide that by 500 seconds and it makes the maximum amount of P-switches hit to 54. Additionally, it takes 32 frames from the beginning of the level until the first P-switch activates. That means the clear condition actually needs to be one extra since the 55th P-switch does start, but it never finishes because the timer runs out. After all that, it gives the player roughly 5 seconds to finish the level. So what did I do with all that extra time then? First, I had to figure out how to get out of the never-ending loop. This was solved by using a door placed on the right side of this pipe. Thankfully, these burners give just enough time to enter the door before dying. It's also important to note that if the player does not enter right at this moment, they cannot beat the level anymore because they are forced to enter the pipe and start an additional P-switch timer, which would cause the player to time out, since there is no way to enter the door from this pipe because of the fire bars. So you better make sure you're paying attention. And even though I already put the clear condition to force players to stay in the loop, I made this a key door with the key in the final bob bomb that gets destroyed because why not? Also, instead of dumping you right on top of the goal, I decided to add one final pixel perfect jump. So if you die, then you have to redo the entire level, which I totally did not have to do. But hey, at least I was kind enough to give you a visual cue to line up the jump, or even use the more consistent wall to crouching strat. So I do have some sort of heart in my evil body. And with that, the entire foundation of the most time consuming level was completed. All that was left was to add some finishing touches to the level. Oh yeah, and to add 14 more bob bombs just because I wanted to. Nice. Once completed, I saved the level, loaded it up in CoreSpot, and proceeded to perform the clear check. Once I entered the first door and started the first P-switch loop, I made sure my down input was continuously being pressed. Then I peacefully went to bed since I knew I would have more than enough time to get 8 hours in. Except when I woke up, I found that my Switch also went to sleep. Thankfully, I was able to still play the level after it woke up. Except I died, because I forgot to hold down. So I turned off the sleep setting on my Switch, added a few more touches to the level, then waited the following night to repeat the process. Except when I woke up, I found that I forgot to remove a key I used for testing earlier. So after removing the dev key and double checking to make sure I did not forget anything else, I repeated the process one more time. And when I woke up, I was pleasantly surprised to see everything working. It even gave me some time to touch some grass while I was waiting. And also sand too. However, those previous failed attempts were not completely in vain. It gave me a way to calculate exactly how long this level would take to complete, rather than just a rough estimate. After reviewing the footage and taking a few extra samples just in case, I found out that it takes exactly 78,455 frames, give or take a few, which equals to 21 minutes 47.583 seconds to complete one full loop from one P-switch activation to another P-switch activation in real time. Multiply that by 54 loops and it will take roughly 19 hours and 37 minutes. That gave me an idea of when I would need to be prepared to enter the key door to the goal. Many hours later, I noticed that the final few in-game seconds were coming. I had to monitor progress throughout the day just to make sure that I was still entering this pipe and when I knew to take over from the controller, since the very last step required me to hold right and press up to enter the key door once I got the key. I didn't even know if everything would line up since I was relying solely on my error-prone mathematical calculations I made. Regardless, the end was near. The timer got under 10 seconds and I actually started to get nervous. After what felt like forever, I heard the P-switch music stop playing and I knew it was time. I successfully got the key after exiting the pipe, so I was able to enter the door and knew there was only one thing standing between me and this level being uploaded. I could audibly hear my heart pumping. Too bad I died and did everything again a day later. So after getting back to this point, I finally did the pixel perfect jump and finished the level. Total time? 19 hours, 36 minutes, and 24 seconds. Final file size of the clear video, 166 gigabytes. And for those that are genuinely curious, I will link the entire 19+ hour clear video in the description. Also, I'm bad with level names, so this was the best I could do. So do I regret making this level? No, not at all actually. Surprisingly, this idea was what motivated me to break out of my 2-year hiatus and make a new level. Granted, it wasn't a Kaiser level, or a level anyone should have made. I still really enjoyed the problem solving aspect of this terrible concept, and was happy to somehow make it work. As a matter of fact, it actually inspired me to make more terrible levels purely for your enjoyment, so expect more of these types of levels in the future. And finally, should you boo this level? Yes. Yes you should. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you when I make my next monstrosity.